All right, so how many of you think you have imposter syndrome? I'm glad I see some guys raising their hands because and I think this is something that's changed over the last 2 years that I've been giving imposter syndrome talks. I used to look around the audience and it was like only women, and the guys were like, yeah, no, not me. And then toward the end, the guys would be like, okay, yeah, that's me too. You know, I think what's really been interesting for me is kind of exploring my own imposter syndrome and realizing sometimes the person across you is just a jerk. So we'll talk about that too. All right, but before we jump in, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Melissa Sassi, and I was Chief Penguin of IBM until Monday. No, I didn't get fired. I thought I was going to for the last 3.5 years. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, cool. I thought my mic was coming out for a second. You know, I've been on this journey for the last, 5 years of, am I an entrepreneur? Am I an intrapreneur? Do I want to go out and do the thing? Am I really capable of being a CEO? Am I a CEO? Am I a founder? Do I have all these great ideas? Do I belong at the table? Blah, blah, blah. And Monday I made the leap of saying like, okay, I'm really an entrepreneur now. So that's why you see me saying Chief Penguin of the World. I created this website on Monday announcing my departure from IBM, which has been an interesting journey of me saying, okay, I'm going to go out and do this thing. And I know for many of you, you're looking at the slide thinking, okay, she's going to talk about crypto and Web3. I'm not going to do that. I'll save that for others. But I'm doing some fun things in the crypto space, which I know is a really wonky time to be doing that right now. But trust me, I have some cool stuff cooking. I'm also the founder and CEO of a youth-led nonprofit called Mentor Nations. And we've taught tens of thousands of young people to code in 12 countries. I have my own co-working space, robotics lab, and IoT lab in Tunis, Tunisia, so sandwiched in between Algeria and Libya. We started it as a means of deterring young people from violent extremism and to enable young people to really see beyond their circumstances. You know, underserved and underrepresented communities that were suffering from unemployment and underemployment. Sound familiar? Probably, yeah. I've also, when I think about my entrepreneurship hat, I've decided that, hey, I'm not gonna just make Skills Hustle my side shimmy, it's gonna be my shimmy. And we have an ed tech platform that's all about preparing the world for the future of work. And within that capacity, there's a lot of really interesting things that we're doing around running innovation camps and really thinking about how do we create open innovation inside of companies, inside of communities. So this summer, or actually on July 11th, I close on my house, which living in Dallas, it's a really hot job market. Imagine this. Somebody approached me and said, we want to buy your house. And by the way, we're going to give you $100,000 more than you paid for it in November. What do? Shut up and take my house, right? So me and my daughter are going to be digital nomads for about 6 months, and we'll see how that goes. We've got some interesting projects that we're going to do in Africa, where we're going to be creating innovation ecosystems in a number of different countries. Sounds fun, right? I think so too. For those of you who are on Twitter or on Instagram, feel free to give me a follow. I'll be sharing a lot about my journey and about our journey. Spent a lot of time, working in tech and also on Wall Street. As you can see on my slide, I'm an intrapreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm really passionate about the role that digital skills play when it comes to empowering our young people. And I don't think that everyone should be an engineer. I don't think that everyone should be a data scientist. However, all of us need to understand the basic building blocks of what this computer science thing is all about. And that's something that I focus on quite passionately, if you will. In my capacity at IBM, I was running a startup program. Had 100 startups in my portfolio. My most sexy startup in the portfolio, if one can say that, is Beat Club. How many of you know who Timbaland is? Oh, it's a rough crowd. It's a really rough crowd. He is a music producer. He was on Time's 100 most influential people in the world last year. Has worked with Madonna, Jay-Z. I guarantee you, if I popped up one of his songs, y'all be like, okay, yeah, now we know what you're talking about. I believe that youth should be at the center of everything that we do, because ultimately they're our future. I sit on a few different UN task forces, and I know, snore, I'm super passionate about Bitcoin. I'm not exactly a maximalist, but we'll save that conversation for later, as some of you are like, okay, great, not the right time, Melissa. I'm a creator of all things impossible, and I also was part of creating the first world standard for what it means to be digitally skilled and ready. That was endorsed by the IEEE Standards Board. You'll hear more about this, but I'm also what I call a gatherer of my Thrive Hive. So you can find me on Twitter at Mentor Africa with a K. All right, so now we're gonna jump back to this whole imposter syndrome thing. So be honest. Do you ever think, I know I do, especially when I first started my role at IBM, I did the same thing at Microsoft. I do it every single time I'm in any new experience or a job, even though I may think I know what I've got going on and I may be confident in my skills, I look around and I think, man, all these people are smarter than me. Or was there a huge mistake? Or how did I get here? Or was it all an accident? How many of you, when you're in a new situation, you look around, you're like, what the hell am I doing here? I know I do. I spent the last 8-9 years in tech, and I run coding camps. I teach kids to code. I cannot code my way out of a cardboard box. I have no idea how to code. But you know what? I have a strong, I think, ability to be able to balance between business and technical without putting my skis too far out in front of me and talking as if I actually know what I'm talking about. And this was really hard for me. When I first moved into IBM, I moved into this division where, a lot of lifers, people have been there since the year of the flood, and they had this special nomenclature and this way of speaking. And I'm like, I have no idea what the hell these people are talking about. Not only am I not an engineer, but I also haven't been here since the year of the flood. And I remember coming to my VP, a few months into that job, and I said to her, I'm like, all right, okay, Meredith, I need to admit something. I think I'm getting fired. She was like, why? And I'm like, I just don't understand why X, Y, and Z are special. There's certain aspects where everybody's so excited about this tech, I don't think it really matters. And she's like, I'm glad that you came, because this is one of the challenges that I think we've had, is articulating why X, Y, and Z matter in a way that's not so inside baseball, that's not so in our own words. And I'm like, well, can I talk to somebody in this group or this group or this group? No, they don't know how to do it either. I hired you, so you need to figure this out. Okay. I think it took me about a year to be able to talk about things in a confident fashion where I felt like, oh, okay, it's about leveraging open source and innovation. Okay, I get that. Okay, it's about security and uptime and encryption everywhere. Okay, I get that. Encryption when we're analyzing the data, and that's not happening with other sources. Okay, yeah. And it's about scalability. Okay, I get that. It's about uptime. Okay, I get that. So I think sometimes, we look around the room and we think everybody is smarter than me, but in reality, we all have our own strengths and weaknesses that make us special. So I know sometimes I look across the room as well. This sometimes happens in my personal life as well, where I look and I think, I am just super inadequate. And even when somebody might come to me and say, wow, you did this thing, congratulations. I will look to downplay my knowledge or my skills or my abilities. But I also sometimes never recognize when there was actually a jerk across the table from me making me feel that way, which is a fine balance of figuring out, is it your inner bully, your little Melissa, your little Dr. Sassi in here saying, hey, you're not good enough or you don't belong or whatever, versus the jerk across from you. Now, another thing that I've personally struggled with is this irrational need to feel validated. So someone would compliment me and say, Melissa, you did a great job here. Congratulations, you achieved this thing. And then I'd downplay it. But I'd need them to say that anyway, even though I wouldn't accept that they'd say that. Crazy, right? So again, sometimes I'd look at it and I probably didn't always recognize when there was that jerk across the room making me feel that way, whether it was my own little jerk here or another jerk on the outside. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a pretty strong EQ, and a lot of times I often feel like I can resonate really well with what others are thinking or feeling, or why they're talking the way they are, or why they're feeling the way they feel, even if they don't realize it themselves, which is also, I think, challenging for me. Again, I don't know if any of you feel that way as well. But I think regardless of all these crazy feelings that are coming and going inside of you, or what you might be, experience from someone else, none of us are succeeding by accident. We've all got these amazing strengths that we bring to the table. And at the end of the day, we did achieve that thing. And it was our hard work that brought us there. And yes, that was you. Yes, that was me. So I think it's also important, as I mentioned, to recognize toxic people and toxic behaviors. Before, let's say a year ago when I gave this talk, I really only talked about your inside feelings. And lately, I've had a lot of people, and this is going back like about 6 months ago, I had a lot of people say, well, I don't necessarily think that it's always about you and your internal feelings. Sometimes people are just toxic and they make you feel that way. And so how do you recognize when it's you and your inner voice saying, hey, you suck, versus someone making you feel like you suck because of the words that they use? Either way, whether it's you or someone else, it's super important for us not to allow that external force or that internal force to help us feel like, or to make us feel like we're inadequate. Because at the end of the day, we all have these great superpowers and these special, things that enable us to shine. So either way, what you're feeling is normal. And for those of you who raised your hands, I commend you for saying yes. But I imagine all of us have this feeling inside of us sometimes that says, you're not smart enough, you didn't get here because you deserve to get here. And we're all often out of our depths sometimes. Does that mean you're an imposter? No. Does that mean you suffer from imposter syndrome? Who knows? But ultimately, you're as good as the people around you. Sometimes even better. Again, I don't know if you do this, but I'm often a perfectionist. Perfectionism is not healthy. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for me or anyone around us. Because if we're constantly striving for perfection, so like we've put this project plan in place, we have this goal and this objective of what we want to achieve. And, if we constantly strive for the best, we're always going to be let down, right? And I'm not saying that we need to underachieve, but we also need to recognize that sometimes good is, good enough. And just because something wasn't perfect doesn't mean that it wasn't amazing. So I have a funny story about this slide. This is one of my mentors. This is Susan Bax. For whatever reason, I had her name spelled wrong in the slide when I presented, and I presented a version of this. I've changed it up since then, but I presented a version of this in Riga, in Latvia, a few months ago. And I was on the main stage, and I had a few people come up after me to say, hey, this is like right time, and for me to hear this. I've been really feeling like I want to have a career shift, but I felt like, do I have enough experience to move into that other role that I want to go in? Am I going to be an imposter in that other role? Am I qualified enough? Am I going to be able to hold my own? Am I going to be able to achieve the things I want to achieve? And I remember having that same conversation with Susan. Had this conversation with Susan about how I was feeling. I was in this job that I was good at. I was paid well. The company needed me to do it. I was working at Microsoft at the time. But it just didn't wake me up in the morning. I didn't wake up in the morning and say, this is the thing I was meant to do. At that time, I was working in an operations kind of role. And I, wasn't changing the world. I was just helping the engine to do its thing, meaning the company engine. Microsoft had good results based on the work that I was doing. And I woke up in the morning every day and I'm like, it was just like I was going through the motions. Many of you probably wake up and do that same thing. I had a family to feed. I had, my house to take care of. I had, bills to pay. And ultimately, you work so you can live, not live so you can work, right? But I wanted more. And I sat down with Susan. I'm like, I want more in my career. I want something that I can, feel as if I'm, I don't know, making a difference, changing the world, making the world a better place. But I don't want to go and work for a charity because I have a lifestyle that I've grown accustomed to. And she reminded me that it's possible to do well while doing good, meaning you can make money and you can make the world a better place. And so she helped me come up with this formula of how I could change my career from my operations role into something where I was working with startups and working with cutting edge tech and helping to disrupt industries, but also helping to make the world a better place, meaning solve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it worked. I got a new job. It was like related to social impact. At this time, before I joined IBM, I was running an impact investment fund at Microsoft. And I built internet and energy access solutions around the world. And then I brought digital skills to the newly connected. Who knows who the Dalai Lama is? You better know this one. You better know this one. I get Timbaland, but Dalai Lama, yeah. So one of our projects brought the internet to the Dalai Lama. So I can't say that I am part of inspiring the Dalai Lama to do what he does, but hey, if the Dalai Lama can tweet because of an internet connection that one of our partners built, then I'm going to jump right on that train. So going back to my conversation about Riga, I have a picture, and I take this picture of me, or somebody takes a picture of me, in front of this slide. Again, I heard her name spelled wrong. I sent it over to Susan. I'm like, hey, Susan, I just want to let you know I was in, Riga last week, and I did this presentation. It was all about imposter syndrome and da-da-da-da. Hadn't realized I had her name spelled Betts instead of Bex. And so she starts laughing, and I was like, why is she laughing, And she was like, you spelled my name wrong. I was like, oh my gosh, what an imposter, how embarrassing. She's like, head of brand strategy at Google, spelled her name wrong. Exactly what I'm talking about, imposter syndrome. So, sometimes we fall flat on our faces and it's okay. This is one of my clients at IBM and one of my former bosses, my GM. And one of the days we were sitting there, he said, I heard you did this talk on imposter syndrome. And you're by no means an imposter. If I could think about any imposters, you'd be the last one I think about. And, if you ever, come back and ask me if you're an imposter, I'll continue to tell you over and over and over again, you're not. So if you ever feel like one, come to me and I'll be the first one to tell you, to hell with that, you are not an imposter. So sometimes we need, someone to remind us that, hey, everything's okay and you deserve that seat at the table. Lots of famous people feel this way, which is interesting. I think a lot of, and I think the picture of Cheryl here is probably not the most timely, considering many of the things that she's been going through in her career lately and has created. But I think there are, many different sorts of imposters or people who feel like imposters all over the world. This one strikes me. We often look at Neil Armstrong as, someone who's, inspirational and, reminds us of all the great accomplishments that, humans have the ability to create in their lives. He was at this party and was looking around and everyone was like a Nobel Prize winner, Peace Prize winner or whatever. And he's like, man, what am I doing here? I'm such an imposter. I just went where I was told. These people went out and created stuff. So again, I think it goes back to that concept of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. 70% of people suffer from imposter syndrome at some point in their life. That means most of us. Now, do I think that everyone should be formally diagnosed with imposter syndrome? No. I think it's just this natural feeling that sometimes you feel out of your depth and you feel like, hey, others have it going on and I don't. So when we're in a position where we're feeling like an imposter, it may make us tired and dread going to work. We may not be able to sleep. We may be withdrawn, maybe even from our families as well. Because again, I don't know about you, if things are going bad at work, we tend to take it out on others, whether we want to or not, whether we mean to or not, whether it's the right thing to do or not. We become disengaged. We're anxious. We're irritable. We feel a bit hopeless. Right? Like, it's not a good feeling. So, it was first coined in 1978, but we're not going to talk more about that. I'd like to really get into this checklist that, will help us all kind of think about when you're facing that, what do you do? How do you respond? All right. So again, as I said, I'm glad I saw a bunch of males raising their hands, because a year ago, it wasn't necessarily like that, but I think there's been a lot of conversation around imposter syndrome. So I'm seeing a lot of the dynamics change, even though, men and women suffer from it equally. But I think each of us respond to it differently. I don't necessarily think that it's, by gender, but I think each of us respond to it differently. And it impacts our lives. It impacts our salary, our ability to grow in our career, and also as a founder, it impacts your ability to access capital. Because if you don't understand what you're worth, how are you going to advocate for yourself? How are you going to go out and ask for that raise if you are not confident in your abilities? If you're not confident in what you're bringing to the table? How are you going to go and ask for that promotion? How are you going to go and apply for that new job if you're afraid of how these things are going to feel? Or how are you going to go and say, shut up and give me your money because, yeah, I deserve that $30 million rate or that $30 million investment from your firm, right? So let's kick that madness to the curb, right? All right, so step one, you got to go back to your origin story. And I'm not going to be all psychologist here, but, ultimately this stuff comes from somewhere, There's that thing in your brain, that little Melissa, that little Dr. Sassi that, feels the way she feels for a reason, all right? There's certain things that are relevant in my family dynamics that may make me feel in certain situations like I'm out of my depth. And it may, kind of require me based on my personality to respond a certain way. So it's important to understand where that stuff comes from. And I know that sounds like a bunch of psychologists babble to go back to your feelings, go back to your family, go back to the competition with your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad or whatever your family dynamics were. But ultimately, we've got to embrace wherever that came from. And we have to accept wherever it came from because it's a truth. Whatever happened has happened. And, sometimes those things bring out self-doubt in us, right? But ultimately, we have to stay strong and fight it. Even though if I tried to fight little Melissa, little Dr. Sassi is probably going to win because that voice is too strong. But I embrace it and recognize it's there. And I learn how to get around it. So next thing is what triggers you. So again, we're recognizing where do these things come from. Second thing is we're thinking about what triggers us. Is it a certain place? It might be a situation, an activity. It might be certain kinds of people. There are certain people who trigger me. There's certain types of people that may trigger you. There's certain situations that may trigger you. Or it could even just be a plain old emotional state. It's not like we wake up in the morning every single day feeling great. Sometimes we just feel bad. We don't know why. We just feel bad, right? So again, what triggers you? All right, third, we're going to embrace change. And we're going to recognize that, we've got this distorted narrative sometimes that we have about ourselves. And I think a lot of people often say that we are our own worst bully or nightmare. Because the way we talk about ourselves inside of our head, it's much harsher than anyone ever talks to us, right? So we're going to turn those negatives into positives and we're going to recognize our achievements. So I'm not going to sit there in that room with the 6 engineers and wonder, wow, why can't I build that thing? No, Melissa, you weren't meant to go build that thing. You were meant to go do X, Y, and Z, so on and so forth. We're going to recognize when we're minimizing our accomplishments, when someone gives us a compliment, we're going to accept it as truth. How many of you downplay when someone gives you a compliment? Yeah, right? Like, oh, well, it was the team. When in reality, you're like, no, that team didn't do it. That was me. All right. So we're going to accept the possibilities, and that, our accomplishments, we're going to accept them internally and externally, not being afraid to talk about them. How many of you are active in social media when you talk about something amazing you've achieved? Either an award, you're going to go and do a speaking engagement, you write blogs, share your ideas for it. How many of you are active in sharing your skills, experiences, or accomplishments externally? I should see more hands. It impacts your ability to gain access to capital, to get a raise, to get a promotion. I promise you that. I'm not saying you need to share everything and anything like me, because that's probably not the direction you want to go in. But each of us have our own persona online, and that's okay. Number 4, truth time. We're going to own it. We're going to own that, hey, I got these feelings. I got this thing inside of me that says this. I got this little Dr. Sassi that sometimes makes me feel ashamed, makes me feel guilty. And you know what? I'm also going to recognize when it's just a jerk sitting across from me making me feel that way. All right? But I'm also going to share when I'm feeling vulnerable. And I know that's a scary thing. Like, imagine you're with your peers and you have to say, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable because I don't understand blah, blah, and blah. And maybe it's not the right time in that setting, because maybe, there's a lot of people there. But think about how you can, gather folks around you, even if it's not in that very moment, to understand what you don't understand, instead of just accepting it as a truth. I'm big now on sharing my vulnerabilities. And it's taken me a while to get there, where I now, share things that make me, scared or uncomfortable. And yeah, sometimes that makes other people uncomfortable. My boss at IBM used to tell me, and the first time he told me, I didn't know how to take it. And again, I kind of wanted to cry when he told me. He said, Melissa, you make people uncomfortable. And then he paused, and I was like, oh God, what have I done now? And so I was sitting there, and he's like, don't worry, I know you're overthinking it in your brain. And I'm like, okay, so explain to me, what do you mean I make people, what did I do? And he goes, no, you make people uncomfortable in a good way. And what I mean by that is you push people beyond their boundaries, you push them to connect things that are not connected, and you push them to go outside of their comfort zone. And a lot of people here are not used to that, and I want you to keep doing it. But sometimes you're not going to make friends, and sometimes you're going to feel alone, because you're a rule breaker. You break ceilings, and you're an innovator. You're creative, yet you get things done. And I want you to keep it up. But know that sometimes it's going to be a lonely place. I didn't know how to feel about that. I still think about that conversation about, by being a rule breaker, by being an innovator, am I constantly going to feel like I've got this churn happening between me and others? And how am I going to rationalize that inside of me to feel like, yeah, you should keep going and keep doing the thing, even when you feel like you're going it alone? So we've got to articulate our thoughts and our feelings, even in public, which again, I know is scary, because it's just as important to think about what makes you vulnerable as what makes you strong and competent. And I'm not saying that I'm going to get up, here and talk about everything I'm bad at, like expense reports, or remembering if I paid my electric bill before I left. I have no idea. Or remembering who my water company is. I have no idea. But what I can tell you is I know what my strengths are, and if you don't know, you better find out quick. And if you still can't figure it out, ask your friends. They'll tell you. They'll tell you what you're good at. So own those. All right, number 5, embracing your awesomeness. So be aware, again, recognize when you're not being rational. You're sitting around a room and you think, oh God, everybody's smarter than me, or wow, I'm in Greece. What am I doing standing up here talking about this stuff? Am I being too much of a psychologist and babbling on? No, own it. Accept your truths as rational. No, Melissa, you deserve to be on that stage, and you should be on that stage, so own it, right? Counter those negative feelings with positive ones so that they're more prominent. And commit to saying things like, you know what, is it fair? I mean, how many times do we do this? I remember a few years ago, I have this really amazing girlfriend from Microsoft. She's a thought leader. She's an entrepreneur. She's an engineer. She's just like everything. And she's beautiful. Like all these things that like I would aspire to be, or I aspire to be, that's her, right? And when I first met her, before I knew her, I was like, oh man, you know, like look at all these places she's at and all these things she's doing, you know? And it wasn't like I was trying to compete with her, but I was comparing my chapter 5 with her chapter 25. So don't compare your chapter 5 with someone else's chapter 25. You know, we all are on our own journeys. And even if that person is X number of years younger than you, it doesn't matter. All right, number 6, time for self-care. All right, we're gonna fail. Things are gonna go like completely to the wayside sometimes, and we're gonna be embarrassed, and we're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay. We've got to value them and really think about our growth mindset and accept failure as a learning. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's embarrassing. You know, last year in one of my roles at IBM, and I had pretty much the same role throughout the thing, but I sometimes would bring in certain projects here and there when I fancied, or when the company wanted me to take on certain things. And there was this one where I just failed. Like I just failed miserably. I didn't have the right setup. I didn't have the right budget. I didn't have the right team, the right external support. It just failed. And, you know, I realized that I could like push it under the rug and pretend like it didn't happen, or I could do it loud and proud. Like, you know what, this thing failed. Here's why I think it failed. Here's what I think we could do better. And instead of it kind of coming as like egg on my face, if you will, of wow, look, Melissa failed, it was like, oh, look at the things we need to do and the things we need to improve upon. So just remember, you know, how do you shift those things over time? Again, don't set ourselves up for failure. Don't set yourself up for failure. As I mentioned earlier, perfectionism is dangerous. So don't set up unrealistic expectations for yourself. And again, take time for yourself. You know, whatever it is that helps you feel rewarded, give yourself micro opportunities to take a few steps back, whether that's emotional care, social care, physical care. You know, think about what you will do to take care of yourself and actually do it. Write it down. Don't just say you're going to do it, actually do it. Number 7, experiment. Expand your expertise. Get out of your comfort zone. Volunteer. Take on a stretch assignment. Take on calculated risks. You know, don't be afraid to take on something because you feel like you're going to feel out of your depth or like everyone else is smarter than you. Share what you're working on. Share your successes loud and proud. It does not make you arrogant. Doesn't make you arrogant at all. Granted, there's a fine line between how do you talk about some of these accomplishments externally and being arrogant. And I trust that all of you will get that down, you know, over time. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a big fan of what I call gathering your Thrive Hive. And this is your community. This is your group of people who are sharing in your success, who believe in you. And they're people that give you a safe space to share your vulnerabilities, your flaws, your insecurities. They're people you can shine with. Is that rain? Welcome to Greece. I thought it was supposed to be sunny. I thought it was supposed to be sunny, and there was, yeah, we're going to talk about this, Greece, all right? I don't know what's happening, but this is not what I heard. This is not what you told me Greece would be like. Be tolerant of your mistakes, of the rain in Greece. Be tolerant. Think about what advice you would give a friend. How many times do we give advice to a friend, and then we think about like that same thing happening to us, and we do the opposite? Right? Like that boyfriend I need to kick to the curb. Technically I did, but he keeps coming back, and all my friends are like, really? You're still talking to him? And then I'm like hiding and pretending until he calls and they all see him on my phone. I thought you weren't talking. No, I'm not. I'm not talking to him. So think about what advice you would give a friend and actually do that. Next is we get ready to do the thing. I got this. I believe I got this. And set your intention that you're going to go out and do that thing. And you're going to do so in a way where you don't feel like everybody around you is smarter than you. Because sometimes they are, and that's okay. But step 10, as Donna Sakar, who's my friend from Microsoft, who's the amazing fashionista. By the way, that's can't really tell, but that's one of her jackets. She heads up the accessibility team at Microsoft, in the technical side of the accessibility team at Microsoft. She announced that she had dyslexia some time ago. And so she's like, all these things combined into one. And she still goes out every single day and does the thing. So no matter what you've got going on in your life, go out and do that thing. So again, you can find me on Twitter at Mentor Africa with a K. How am I doing on time? Good. Any questions?
Thank you so much for that. My mic not working for some reason. Thank you, Stavro.
What a great presentation. I'm sure we have a lot of questions in the room. Thank you.